Hello my moody friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Mariah and this is Mariah's Moods. In this video, we are going to talk about some badass female main characters. So this video is part of a collaboration that I'm doing with a ton of fantastic booktubers. They are also going to be giving you some recommendations for some badass female characters. So I'm going to link their recommendations videos down below in the description box. When you're done watching this one, please hop over to them and see what type of recommendations they have. And by the end of this collaboration, you should hopefully have a million different recommendations for if you're looking for a strong, badass female main character. Whew. Okay, so I have come up with 10 books that feature badass, strong female main characters, or just even maybe not a main character, but has a very strong female presence, or just straight up female badassery. Like, we are here for all of the femme fatale, the femme, I'm going to kick your ass if you look at me wrong. Like, I'm all for that. So when I'm reading, I love strong female characters. I want to see women that are strong in so many different ways. In my opinion, strength doesn't always come from physical strength, like I'm going to beat you and kill you and stomp on your corpse. Like, that is not always, in my opinion, strength. And sometimes strength can be seen as a little more quiet and reserved and very controlled. So there's lots of different ways that you can interpret a badass female character. So I have pulled 10 that I think that pretty much anybody can enjoy regardless of what you read. I've kind of divided them into genre, and so I'll put timestamps down below if you are looking for a specific genre recommendation, but all of these are fantastic and I highly recommend all of them for various different reasons. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the list. So I will preface and say this, that this was actually more difficult than I thought it was going to be, because when I look at my shelves, so many of them feature strong, like, female characters, and like for a variety of reasons, and I was just like, how do I narrow this down? And so I struggled. So I decided that I would just choose out of my favorites of all time, those strong female character leads. And so some of these are going to be very old. Some of them are probably books that you've already heard of, and if you haven't, please give them a try. And as I'm looking through this, I'm like, it's time for some rereads because all of these are fantastic. So the first two books that I want to talk about are going to fall into the fantasy genre, which is a genre that I read the most. So that one was really, really hard to narrow down because I love in fantasy when we have a strong female character. Like, that's all basically I need. So I decided to go with my top two favorites female characters / series. So the first one that I want to talk about is probably no surprise, and I'm going to guess will probably be repeated within this collaboration several times, but it's because it is true. And that is going to be our main character from the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. So it's really hard to talk about this book and to talk about the character in general because there's some identity switching in this series. So I'm just going to start off with the first book of the series, Throne of Glass. We are following Selena, and she is an assassin who has been basically imprisoned for a couple of years in one of the worst work prisons ever. Like, the life expectancy of these prisoners is like less than a few months, and she has been there for 2 years. They're basically just keeping her alive as punishment. But she is released from this prison and approached by the prince to basically be his champion in this competition that the king is holding for basically a bunch of different warriors, and they're going to be going through these trials, and the last one standing is basically going to be the king's assassin. So to get out of prison, she's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. That's just the surface of what happens in this entire series. It is fantastic. It is probably my favorite series, if not of all time, definitely from Sarah J. Maas. So when I tell you that Selena Sardothien is ruthless, and smart and just badass. Like when I think badass, I think of this bitch. Like yes, yes, queen. I can't say too much, but if you haven't checked out Throne of Glass, the series, please do it. Please do it. It is everything. It is everything. All right, so the next book that I want to talk about for the fantasy genre is going to be The Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is an old one, but this is a great, great trilogy. I was just kind of like flipping through. I was like, I need to reread this. It's probably been about 10 years since I read this book, but still every time I pass it on my shelf, I look at it and I'm like, you are just fantastic. So this is a YA fantasy, but it is done so well that it, to me, wasn't written as if like a teenager is talking, if you know what I mean. So this is following Karu, who is an art student in Prague. She lives a very different life from many, many people. She works for this like shopkeeper that collects teeth and sends her on these errands. She speaks lots of different languages. Not all of them are human languages. She has this like bright blue hair that literally grows out of her scalp. And there's just like these weird things that keep happening in this world. There's basically these black handprints that keep just showing up along these buildings, and there's basically people getting in this like rip in space or between worlds, and she is basically thrusted into this and trying to kind of figure out what in the world is going on. So this is really, really fantastic. It kind of reminds me of Throne of Glass in the sense that we get a big reveal at the end of this first book that is just like mind-blowing, and we get a little bit of an identity flip or reveal, a part of the story. There is some romance involved, which is really, really great. And let me just say this. The story begins with, once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well. Like, oh, it's so fantastic. So the next set of very strong, badass female characters I'm going to talk about are all from the thriller/horror genre. This is probably the second most frequent genre that I pick up. So again, it was really hard to choose to narrow them down. These aren't any particular order. I'm just kind of grabbing from the stack. So for thriller/horror, if you are looking for strong female badass characters, I would highly recommend the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. These women are everything. So this is set in the 90s. It's a series of housewives that basically make a book club where they read true crime nonfiction novels. They get together and discuss these, but they've been a book club for a very long time, so they've also created very strong relationships with one another and strong friendships. In their neighborhood, a vampire moves in, and the main one that we're following, Patricia, is very suspicious of his behavior and basically is like, we can't let this vampire, first of all, we need to expose him as a vampire, and we can't let him live in this neighborhood. And while this is happening, in another neighborhood that is a neighborhood predominantly of color and lower economic status, children keep disappearing or they're reappearing extremely sick, and they don't know what to do, and they cannot find out who is doing this to these children. So the Southern Book Club decides to take down this vampire, and they do it in an epic way. It is fantastic. The writing in this book is just so relatable and easily accessible, and I will tell you that as someone who grew up in the 90s, the references to the way the houses were, or the way that the mothers dress and what they're concerned about, it was just completely relatable. Like, I knew exactly what they were talking about, but I don't think that you needed to be like a 90s kid to enjoy this book. Grady Hendrix does a phenomenal job relaying this story, and the way that the vampire is like described, it's not like Interview with the Vampire or a Twilight vampire. Like, he is very much a regular looking dude, which makes it even scarier. But what I really, really love is the strong female relationships that we find in this book and the way that they band together to save their neighborhood, save children, and protect themselves is absolutely phenomenal. It does get a little gross at some point, so this is like horror thriller, so just be aware of that when you go into it. I honestly highly recommend the audiobook. The audiobook narrator for this book did a fantastic job. So the next thriller that I want to talk about is Pretty Girls by Katherine Slaughter. This book is just fantastic and fast-paced, and I could not stop reading. So this is following two sisters, Claire and Lydia. They've been estranged for a very long time, but when Claire's husband passes away, she finds some pretty disturbing things on his home computer and doesn't know what to think about it. So she calls her sister Lydia there to basically help her figure out, what is this? What was happening? Was my husband someone that I didn't actually know? And so they start to kind of investigate what was going on with her husband's potential secret life. So along with that, Claire and Lydia actually had an older sister that went missing when she was in college many, many years ago. So as they start to do a little digging, they start to see a little bit of connections between the two scenarios. That's all I want to say. I don't want to spoil this book, but I will say, if you are interested in reading this book, it's fantastic. I love Karen Slaughter. This is my favorite Karen Slaughter, but it is jacked up. Like, it is very explicit. She doesn't shy away from the horrors of what can happen to people, and specifically to women. So please check your trigger warnings before reading this book, because almost all of them are in there, I will say that, but it is fantastic. And to see Claire and Lydia band together to figure out what's happening, protect one another, and to protect potential women out there is just fantastic. And I love to see people who are just everyday people come together and save others. All right, so the next one I'm sure you've heard of. You might even seen the movie, but I cannot talk about badass females and not bring this book up, and that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, you need to know. So this book is following Nick. Nick's wife has recently gone missing, and after some investigations, the detectives believe that Nick is maybe responsible for his wife's disappearance. As you're following the investigation and Nick, you are also reading diary entries from his wife, and let's just say things aren't exactly the way that they seem. And that is all I'm going to say about this book. This is a thriller in all ways, and there is a character in here that is a badass, and that is all I can say. Because I don't want to spoil it for you, but just trust me, this is a good one. So the last thriller that I want to recommend that has a strong badass female character is going to be No Exit by Taylor Adams. In this story, we are following Darby. Darby is on her way home from college to visit her mother, who is sick in the hospital, but she gets stuck in a snowstorm. So she pulls over into a rest stop where she finds a few other people kind of waiting out the storm, because I believe they're in Utah, so winter's in the mountains. You don't want to drive. And so while she's basically waiting out the storm, she goes outside and she sees that in one of the vans there is a child that is locked in an animal crate in the back. And she has to figure out who this child is and which one of these people in this rest area are responsible for this child, and how can she save this child in the middle of a winter snowstorm. This is a really awesome, like, isolated thriller where you have a small cast of characters. There's twists and turns all throughout, and you are just on the edge of your seat trying to figure out, who is this child? Why is she there? Which one of these people have kidnapped her, and what is Darby going to do? Because they're stuck. It is so fantastic. I read this in a sitting. I couldn't put it down. And Darby, don't mess with Darby. That's all I'm going to say. So the next genre I want to talk about is historical fiction, with a little bit of romance involved, but both of these books have very strong female characters, and not always in the sense of physical strength. These women are more of an intellectual strength, which I always find interesting. So the first one I want to recommend is A Curious Beginning. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell series. So following the death of her aunt, Veronica feels that she's finally free to be the woman that she just wants to be in a very Victorian society, but she is almost abducted, but with the help of a baron is basically able to avoid this abduction. But before the baron can actually let her know what was happening, he is found murdered. So with the help of the baron's friend Roker, him and Veronica basically work together to figure out why was she being targeted and what is happening with all of that, who killed the baron. This is a fantastic book and series. Veronica and Roker's banter back and forth are, other than the romance, Veronica herself is just, she's just a badass. Like, she is just an intellectual badass. I love that she defies the norms of the times. She wasn't concerned about getting married and having children. She wanted to travel the world. She wants to live an adventurous life and not be tied down to the norms that were put on females back in that day. And I just love to see it. Other than her qualities, just the general mystery of this book is really, really great, and I cannot recommend enough. The next historical fiction that I want to recommend is going to be The Huntress by Kate Quinn. This is a post-World War II historical fiction novel. So this is a multiple perspective story following three basic main characters. We have a teenager, Jordan, who is living in the United States post-World War II. We have Ian, who is basically traveling all around Europe, finding Nazis to bring them to trial for their war crimes. And we're also following Nina, who was a female pilot in the Soviet Union's military during World War II. Ian and Nina are working together to find the Huntress, who was rumored to be a woman married to a high-ranking Nazi officer who would lure people to her property, disguising as some type of refuge, but would actually end up attacking those people seeking asylum. So post-World War II, they are trying to bring the Huntress to justice. Nina is a badass. Like, how many times can I say badass in a video? But this is it. Like, Nina is it. Again, I love to see women defying women norms, societal norms, in a time where women were highly suppressed. I mean, Nina grew up in the Soviet Union in the harshest part of the country, and basically at a very young age had to learn how to fend for herself. She joined the Soviet Air Corps. We've got some forbidden sapphic romance a part of her story. She just wanted to escape her life and protect her country and will stop at nothing to do that. Jordan, which is our female teenager in the United States, is also a very strong character in a nice, just intellectual way, and with a strong will that so many female teenagers have, that is just so fantastic to watch and read. This book is, I think about this book a lot. So if you're just looking for any type of World War II historical fiction with strong lead characters, Kate Quinn is just, she's the queen of that. She has so many books that are just fantastic, centered around this part of history with very, very strong female characters. My favorite just happens to be The Huntress, but I love it. I love it so much. So the final two books I want to recommend are going to be middle grade. I don't believe that just because we are looking for strong, badass female characters that we have to look for adult fiction. There are so many middle grade books that have great representations of strong female leads. and I think even as an adult we can all enjoy them. So the first one I want to talk about is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. This is another kind of historical fiction, but it is more so a YA, maybe upper middle grade read. So this story is following Liesel at the start of the Nazi aggression in 1939. She's recently been orphaned and is staying with this family who is a little eccentric, with the mother being a little aggressive, but she creates a very strong relationship with her adoptive father. Liesel does not know how to read, but learns with her adoptive father how to read, and basically she is trying to understand this changing world around her and what this actual new world is and what is actually happening to some of her fellow townspeople. But her adoptive family actually decides to hide a Jewish man in the basement, and the story kind of goes from there. What I really enjoy about this book is that Liesel has that quiet strength, the just stubbornness, just that perseverance that she will not let this new world get to her, and that she will survive and hold on to what was good in the world, and she begins to steal books, and I just love that. Another really cool thing about this book that I think is unique is it is actually told from Death's perspective. So we are reading from Death narrating this story for us. So Death is personified in this book, and it is fantastic. It is heartbreaking, but Liesel is a strong young woman. Okay, so the final book that I want to recommend and the badass female main characters is going to be Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Amari is this girl. I just wish I could have been her. Like, when I was 12, why couldn't I have been Amari? Like, why couldn't I have been Amari? This is following Amari Peters. Her brother has recently gone missing. She comes home one day and finds this weird suitcase, opens it up. So she gets this message from her brother that's basically saying that she has been invited to this summer camp tryout of the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, which is basically part of this world that basically separates the magical world from the world that we know. And so children are able to join this tryout and become employees of this bureau, depending on their different strengths, and they are given basically powers. And so Amari joins this, hoping that she can also find some information about her missing brother Quentin. And this story is just so fantastic. There's just so many more levels to this, and there's so many things that this author is saying that I think is so important for all readers, not just middle grade readers. What I really love about Amari is her tenacity. Like, she perseveres. She is not going to stand down regardless of so many things that go against her. There is conversation surrounding social economic status, around race, around so the issue of the Nepo baby, and how some people have certain advantages and privileges over others for a variety of reasons. And regardless of so many terrible things that happen to Amari, she does not stop when it comes to finding out what has happened to her brother. It is so inspiring to read, and I cannot recommend this enough. Regardless if you're an adult or not, I think anybody, any age could really enjoy this book. Alright, so, oh gosh, that's it. These are the 10 books that I recommend if you are looking for a strong, badass female lead. All of these books are fantastic. I cannot recommend all of these books enough. They all have different elements of badassery, but all of them have very strong female leads that I think anybody could enjoy at any age range and any genre. So please give these a chance. I promise you will not be disappointed. So in the comments, give me some recommendations, because I am constantly looking for strong female lead characters. So let me know if you have any recommendations down below. Also, don't forget to go check out the other booktubers that are going to be recommending strong female badass characters. I'm sure they have fantastic recommendations as well. Give us all a like, give us all a subscribe, do all of the things. If you like bookish and lifestyle content, you are in the right place. Hope you're having a wonderful time out there and that your day is full of good moods and good vibes. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye!